Hello Internet, my name is the Golden Stalfos, and today we're going to do an entire video talking about rouroni kenshin, also known as Samurai X if you watch the really bad dub. And obviously the first thing that we have to mention whenever we talk about this is the author, Watsuki, is a pedophile, and he's not in jail for it. He just got like a $2,000 fine and then walked away, which, if you're poor, $2,000 may sound like a lot, but that's 2 months' rent for me. So, and I'm still poor, and he has a very successful manga that sells millions of issues, and so you know, do not support this person by buying any official stuff. Okay, just don't. Like, just pirate it. It's just pirate it, please. Anyway, I mean, like, I know some people will be like, oh, you have to separate the art from the artist and all that, but like that's hard to do in this situation. Like, for example, uh, the main romantic pairing in the story is between Kenshin and Kaoru. Now, nothing comes of it until like a flash forward after the story is done, but but when they first meet, Kenshin is 28 and Kaoru is 16. Now, sure, 16 is above the age of consent in Japan and parts of America, but still, that's a pretty whack age gap, and it's hard to imagine that's done for no reason, you know. It's probably because that's what the author is into, which is a little fucked up, you know? So if you're going to enjoy Rurouni Kenshin, you need to pirate it. Still, it's hard to justify not talking about this series. It's very influential, and a lot of people still say, oh, this is my favorite thing ever, although I don't know why. It's really basic. Like, I get why it's influential, because it was an early entry. Like, this came out before One Piece. But also, like, it's super basic and archetypal and kind of jank. I mean, the artwork is pretty solid, and the story is fine, but like, it doesn't do anything that I haven't seen in a dozen other stories. But it did it first, so that's why. Although, as the old adage goes, first is the worst. Over time, people figure out how to improve things, and that applies to writing as well. So, eh. Regardless, this story was one of the early forerunners in its genre, and one of the first to get an anime adaptation that was broadcast in the West, which is part of the reason why the dub is so gosh darn awful. I mean, like, it's kind of beautiful in its own way because it's like an absolute cheese fest. And to a certain extent, the manga is also cheesy, but ooh, it is on a whole other level if you watch the anime. In fact, the anime is so cheesy, I've never been able to properly finish it, which is fine because the anime doesn't even go all the way through the manga, but whatever. Which is also silly because the manga isn't even that long. It's not even 300 chapters. And I know some people hear that and think, Jesus Christ, that's long. But like most successful manga are longer than that. Like, you know. Actually, Demon Slayer is about the same length. And one of my biggest problems with that story is the fact that it just seems to tread a lot of the same ground as stories like Rurouni Kenshin that have been out a lot longer. But enough with the preamble, let's talk about the story. So, for anyone who hasn't seen it or read it, Rurouni Kenshin is a story about a roaming samurai named Himura Kenshin, who used to be a really badass assassin when he was like 15 during the war. Um, Also, this entire story revolves around the aftermath of an internal civil war in Japan that is known as the Bakumatsu, and and the problem with that is, one, they don't ever really explain like why people were fighting this war. Like, it's just kind of assumed that the audience is familiar enough with Japanese history to know why this happened and when it happened. Um, like, there's some vague mention of black ships arriving and people arguing about whether or not to open up the country. So, as an outsider, I'm assuming that's like, because Americans came over and were like, hey, we want to trade with you. Open up. But I don't remember there being any particular like war involved with that. Um, like I know England had like some wars with, well, not really wars, but some like battles with China over that issue. But I don't remember there being any similar incident in Japan. I don't know. My point is, I'm not well versed at enough at Japanese history to know exactly what's going on with the backstory section here, and I doubt most people from Western audiences are either. So, just to give a brief rundown of it, from what I could gather in the story, there was this sort of uprising between a few different groups. Um, and that collective intergroup war was called the Bakumatsu, or possibly Bafuku, um, or maybe that was just the name of one of the groups. Again, it's not made super clear. They kind of expect you to know this stuff already. But anyway, the main factions we're concerned with are the one faction that represented, I guess, the old school imperial rule, and the other faction that represented um, equality amongst the classes. It doesn't mention what the classes are, just says, uh, you know, equality for the four classes. I don't know what those four classes are. And it also mentions later that like they treat prostitutes like slaves, so clearly their equality doesn't really account for that much. But whatever. Um, Anyway, Kenshin became a super assassin for the group that was fighting for equality, called the Ishin Shishi, because, you know, if you're going to kill people, you might as well do it for a good reason. Um, no, but really, the entire plot does basically revolve around the fact that Kenshin once thought it was reasonable to kill people in order to establish a bright future where people didn't have to die. Um, but then he decided that was not okay and swore to never kill again, but still fights all the time, because he's got to protect people um, by using a sword. I mean, it's not a regular sword that can cut people. The sword has been reversed so that the cutting edge is inside, which isn't how Japanese swords work, and therefore you couldn't kill someone with it. I mean, you could, but yeah. So anyway, the story opens with Kenshin as like a 28-year-old adult traveling the countryside. He's apparently been running around not killing people for the last 10 years. But now all of a sudden he runs into a girl and just automatically ends up staying with her forever, even though they don't really have any connection at first. It's kind of weird, but whatever. Anyway, he fights some idiots who are pretending to be him, and it's very clear who the superior swordsman is. And then those idiots go and complain to some other guy who beats them up again, and then he goes and fights Kenshin and loses, and then becomes his sidekick. Then a like 10-year-old thief joins up with the dojo. Oh, by the way, the girl runs a dojo. Um, and believes in a sword that doesn't kill people, which even even the guy who goes around wielding a sword in order to not kill people flat out says, "Yeah, that's dumb. That's not how swords work." But like I like your thinking even though it's so dumb. Which kind of just sums up the entire fucking story here. Like everything about it is idealistic and over exaggerated to the point of being absurd, but it ends up being kind of fun because of that. Anyway, from here we settle into the first of Ronin Kenshin's three big chunks. The first chunk, I don't even know if you could call it an arc. It has several smaller arcs within it. But basically, there's a bunch of dumb villain of the week shit. There's a bunch of like short little things where they meet up against where you know Kenshin's group goes up against an enemy group, but it's not like a long drawn out full arc thing. It's just like maybe 6 chapters, and you kind of settle into this vibe of just you know everything kind of comes in and goes out, and you know you just spend 3 chapters on Yahiko being Yahiko for some reason. Like even calls it a side story, but all of the main characters are involved. It just pivots to focus on the kid instead of focusing on Kenshin. So like, eh, it's just a, you know, it's just like this weird slice of life thing, slice of life villain of the week thing. Um, and it goes on like that for a surprisingly long time. You know, new characters are introduced. Some take longer to introduce than others. Like Megumi, the main medic throughout the series, is introduced in this sort of longer than average mini arc, where basically she starts out as being like the victim of a plot, and then they have to fight her, you know, the people who are oppressing her or whatever, and then you know, and then that breaks down into like 3 or 4 small fights, and then one big one at the end. You know how a shonen arc is. One of the interesting things I noticed about this series, and that kind of sets it apart, is that there aren't enough supporting characters on the good guy team to match up with all of the bad guys. So Kenshin always ends up fighting at least 2 or 3 of the bad guys. And no matter how it's set up, Kenshin is always the only one who gets multiple fights. Everybody else just gets one. And it's a little bit ridiculous. But yeah. But anyway, this phase goes on for a little while. We get introduced to people who fought with Kenshin in the past, people who didn't get a chance to fight with Kenshin in the past, but now they're ready to, you know, that kind of thing. However, at a certain point, it takes a hard turn. So basically, they introduce this character as if he were a villain of the week again. And he's just like this guy that Kenshin fought with in the past and couldn't beat. You know, they always drew and had to pull away or whatever. So now they have to fight for real to find out the true winner. And it still ends in a draw. Um, but anyway, this guy's just a giant dick to everyone. And he almost kills several members of the supporting cast, but doesn't because, of course. And then after their fight is concluded, it's revealed that, oh, actually, I was just sent here to test you to see if you can, you know, help us with a thing we're dealing with. Turns out the guy who took up your assassin job after you left, he's kind of a piece of shit and maybe trying to take over the country soon, and we need you to kill him. And at first everyone's like, oh fuck no, Kenshin doesn't kill, remember? That's his whole thing. But then the guy who asked them to do that gets fucking murdered, and and Kenshin decides to just fucking leave and go fight the bad guy on his own without anyone's help. Um, and so this starts a huge arc. Like a third of the manga's runtime is spent on this arc, maybe more. Um, we journey into new locations. We meet new comrades who are connected to old enemies in a way that is kind of spicy, I guess. We get the rundown of the enemy group. It's Shishio at the top, and then there's 10 other people who are supposedly good with swords versus the you know one swordsman, one punching guy, and a kid with a fucking wooden sword. Um, like he's 10. Like, whatever. Anyway. Um, oh, and the policeman guy who stabs people. So there's four of them all told. And as if the odds weren't stacked high enough against them while this whole thing is going on, uh, the fourth or one of the characters who used to be an enemy and got away comes back and joins up with the bad guys so that he can have a rematch with Kenshin. Now, they do end up meeting some side characters throughout the arc that help them balance out the numbers a bit. They aren't like worth talking about in this video though. But in the end it's just like the same shit that they were doing villain of the week style. They just spent a lot more time on build up. Like his sword breaks, so he has to get a new one, and it's the exact fucking same thing made by the exact fucking same person, but now it's better because it's the true version, I guess. I don't whatever. But, in the end, it's just like a series of like 5 consecutive one-on-one bouts with the various members of the crew. Um, and Kenshin has to fight 2 instead of, where everyone else gets just 1. And, you know, um, and then he beats the big bad, and the big bad dies, even though Kenshin doesn't kill him because isn't it fucking always the case, you know? And so in the end, this story had like a lot of buildup and a lot of stuff happening, but like it's the same as all of the other Villain of the Week mini stories. They just stretched it out forever for some reason. Um, but whatever. At the end, they're all happier and better off and go home, right after Kenshin says goodbye to his dead wife. Um, Like it is kind of shocking that he's married, but there's this moment where he like goes to visit a grave and I'm like, "Oh, that's definitely like his dead girlfriend or whatever." Um, you know. And I wasn't expecting them to have been married, I guess, but like it's obvious that if the sad loner character with a dark past goes to visit a grave, it's his dead lover. That's the but they leave it hanging for like 6 chapters before they're finally like, it was my wife. I'm like, just fucking, we knew that. Just, anyway. And then they spend like 6 fucking chapters or more than that. It might be more than that on on explaining how Kenshin had a wife, and I'm like, it's not really that complicated, is it? Like he's a guy, she's a girl. That kind of shit happens. He's 28. It's just whatever. But he did end up making it this whole big thing that's interwoven with his scar and why he decided not to kill people and the bad guys that are coming after them this time are mad because his wife died. Um, because he accidentally killed her while he was fighting literally blind against her kidnappers. So, which is really dumb because, like, the way it's drawn in the panels, it looks like there's no possible way he could have hit her. Like, what happens is he gets blinded and deafened and just like completely fucked over by fighting off a series of kidnappers on his way to get to her. Um, and it's all temporary, of course, but whatever. But he's fighting the last guy who's standing in front of the hut where they have her stored, and she bursts out of the hut with a little knife and tries to stab the guy, but somehow that puts her in between the guy and Kenshin, even though he was standing between the hut and Kenshin before, and it's just very weird. And so anyway, his tragic backstory is revealed, and then they spend the next huge chunk of time dealing with her brother or whatever. Like, they take an annoying amount of time to build up to the first battle, and then there's a sequence of battles, and it plays out just like all the others. Except this time, there's one really big enemy with a really big weapon who they don't completely take care of right at the beginning. They just kind of disable him temporarily. And then at the end, he interrupts the final portion of the fight and let the bad guy get past Kenshin. Now, I mean, right from the beginning of the fight, I was like, what? Why didn't you completely incapacitate this dude the way you do everyone else? And more importantly, like, why didn't you break his big ass weapon since you don't have a problem cutting up inanimate objects? What is this? But apparently Kenshin had to be fucking retarded during that scene so that he could lose later. Because that's good storytelling. Anyway. In any case, the bad guy gets away from Kenshin, and no one else is standing between him because there's a smoke screen or whatever. And so he kills Kaoru, except, like, obviously not. Like, I don't know why. I don't know how exactly you expect me to believe that you're going to kill off the love interest 200 chapters in, but I don't believe that you're going to kill the love interest 200 chapters in. You're fucking lying. Like, I don't care how dead she looks. Like, that's clearly bullshit. It's fucking dumb. Anyway. So apparently what they did instead is they kidnapped her, replaced her with a body double, basically, and made it look like they had killed her, so that everyone would mourn her, and Kenshin would feel really, really bad. And I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, I think it would have made more sense if she did die, but whatever. But anyway, everyone thinks she's dead, and they spend the next, 6 chapters pretending that she's dead, and then slowly introducing the idea that, wait, what if it was a fake? We have to take the chance and look at the corpse. Just how would you not have noticed sooner? You have an actual doctor there. Surely the very first thing that would have happened is the doctor would pull out the sword and treat the wound and try to, whatever. Everyone has to act stupid so that we can progress the plot point to get to another stupid fight scene on the beach. Fine. Well, in any case, the stupid fight does happen. So basically, this dude kidnapped Kaoru, took her to an island and kept her prisoner, and during that time, everyone just split up. Like, Kenshin goes and just sits down in the middle of a slum town and doesn't move. And everyone else just goes in their own direction for a little while until they get the news that, oh hey, she's not dead, and then they team back up again to go get her. So anyway, they go to get her, and there's this island that they have to go to, and When they get to the island, the very first thing that happens is one of bad guy's ex-subordinates storms off with a bunch of his bodyguards and tries to fight Kenshin. But then his bodyguards get absolutely shit wrecked by the crew without Kenshin even standing up, which is kind of hilarious. Then main bad guy comes down, beats the shit out of his subordinate, starts fighting Kenshin, and at first they seem pretty easy, pretty even, but as time goes on, Kenshin takes damage and the other guy doesn't, and then he gets a power up, and then and then it keeps going for an unreasonable amount of time, and then even though he's been getting his ass kicked this whole time, and the other guy got a big power up, and you know, he just got shot by the subordinate because he wasn't fully beaten up yet. Kenshin wins somehow because fuck it, why not? And they all go home and live happily ever after. The end. Like, that's literally what happens. After that, they spend like 2 chapters on characters saying goodbye to each other and going their separate ways, sometimes for completely arbitrary reasons. Like, Sanosuke just like goes off to America or whatever because the cops are after him. But they're after him because like he beat up a douchebag corrupt politician a few arcs ago, and like it's only just now coming back to hit him, and it's so dumb. Megumi goes away to start her own hospital somewhere, I guess. I mean, I don't know, she was enough of a side character that it didn't seem necessary to make her go away, but whatever. Um, the only people who end up staying in one place are Yahiko and Kenshin and Kaoru. And so um, Kenshin and Kaoru basically, live together happily ever after, and then it cuts forward to 5 years later when Yahiko is 15 and apparently an absolute badass. Um, and he, there's this scene where he inherits the reverse blade from Kenshin, and it's like, cool. All right. And then there's a weird out of place flash forward section that comes to the modern era and has characters that have nothing to do with the existing story. And wow, I just, like, I honestly didn't realize just how much Demon Slayers was ripping off of Rurouni Kenshin, even though this story is fucking decades old at this point. It's kind of absurd. But anyway, that's where the original run of the story ends. Um, he Watsuki, after getting away with being a pedophile, has come back to make more of the manga. It's now being produced on a monthly basis, and there's like 40 chapters. I'm not going to talk about that part because, one, there's not very much of it. Two, I haven't read it all. And three, I don't think it's relevant. Like, the reason people talk about this story is because it's influential. And the reason it's influential is almost entirely due to the villain of the week shit they were doing at the beginning. And I don't think anyone is really, just starting to write manga based on the 40 chapters that Watsuki has since written, after 2 years away because he was a fucking pedophile. Can't stress that enough. Anyway. Also, on a bit of a tangent here, like, monthly manga productions are like the worst thing ever. I hate it. I hate this trend that like old school mangaka have just moved on to monthly productions. Stop. Just fucking Dragon Ball Super and Boruto and this and probably some other things, and it's just like, it's not a good format. It's bad. And honestly, none of you are good at writing month to month because you still write, little cliffhangers as if you were doing a weekly series, and you're not doing a weekly series. So stop writing those little cliffhangers because they don't work, right? Because if I have to wait a month anyway, I already forgot what the cliffhanger was and moved on with my life, you know? It's not drawing me back in, it's just leaving me unsatisfied. But yeah, I hate that trend. It needs to die. And not only does it mean that, like, the story is more drawn out, but it also means I get less of the story. Like, it just takes so freaking long because, 4 times as long, in fact. And the chapters aren't 4 times as long. It's not like you get the same amount of content either way. I mean, monthly produced chapters are typically a bit longer, but they're not 4 times longer. And it's so dumb. Whatever. Anyway, that's Rurouni Kenshin, a really basic ass story with a really basic ass plot. Um, like beyond just being very basic, the only thing I really have a problem with is the fact that like it's got that problem that manga have where it takes a mundane thing from everyday life and exaggerates it to absolutely ridiculous levels for no reason. Um, like one of the most mundane things is this guy who fights by punching, right? But he wears striped sleeves. Well, actually, they're tattoos. But anyway, his arms are striped so that it fools the eye into thinking they aren't as long. and and I mean, like, that might work, maybe. I mean, it wouldn't be that dramatic of an effect, but it might work a little bit. But like, but from there, like that's the most mundane example. Like, it just gets so much more dramatic. Um, like the main bad guy, uh, from the second big arc, Shishio, he has a sword that that bursts into flames when he like rubs it against things because it's covered in like oil and fat from the people he's killed, and it has a serrated edge. So, which is so dumb. Uh, or like the final bad guy that they fight has like super powered nerves because he broke down crying for 3 days after his sister died, and so now he has ultra reflexes and mega muscles, and his nerves are popping out of his skin like, one of those really veiny bros. And it's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous on every level. Or like during that last fight, um, one of the characters who goes up to fight the bad guys is this guy who just always stabs. Like his only attacking move is a stab. And one, that's dumb. You're not going to get anywhere with that. But two, the guy who's fighting him instantly says, "Yeah, that's fucking dumb. I can just step to the right and you're going to miss your fucking stab and I can counterattack. What are you doing?" And yet he still wins. Like the bad guy is just like, "I'm the best at reading my opponent's moves. I can tell exactly what you're doing." But like, but he still just gets stabbed anyway. It's so dumb. But yeah, that's basically my only criticism. It gets really dumb sometimes. But like that's also kind of the charm. Like it's so dumb you kind of have to love it. Um and again, like I said, all the characters are pretty basic. All the plot lines are pretty basic, but it's an older story, so like that's kind of understandable. Um, like I'm not gonna get upset about a story being really basic when it came out, 30 years ago almost. Um, you know, I'll get upset about the story being basic as fuck when it came out much more recently, and it had that older shit to reference, you know, but whatever. And honestly, like sometimes a really simple story is more fun, right? Like you know, you don't always need the most complex character motivations in order to, you know, enjoy things. So sometimes you can just, you know, have fun with a simple story. And I think that Kenshin definitely does that. So, you know, go out and pirate Kenshin. It's good for you. Um, you know, you can enjoy it for a little bit. As long as you pirate it, you can enjoy it. If you don't pirate it, then you're a bad person. So, and you know, like some people don't get that argument, but like the thing is, this guy got away with having child pornography that presumably he bought, um, simply because he was able to afford to pay the fine, right? So if he's caught again, like presumably there's a heavier penalty for repeat offenses, but like, you know, as long as he has money, he can buy more, and as long as he has enough money, he can pay the fines again. So, you know, any money you give to him could end up being used to pay for child pornography. And like, you know, the fact that people pay for it is the reason that children get exploited for it. And, you know, that's not okay. You can't do that. Um, like sure, you can make the argument that owning it is different from making it or whatever, but like people only make it because other people want to own it, just like any commodity. Um, and so if you want people to not make it, you need to also not support the people that buy it. Um, so yeah, basically. And I mean, he's far from the only person in this industry that's responsible for shit like that. Apparently, the guy who makes Toriko also is a pedo. And that fucking sucks because Toriko is pretty good, actually. And I can do a whole video on that. But, like, it sucks because the guy who makes it is a piece of shit. And so now I have to be, you know, conscious of that whenever I talk about Toriko. And I can't just be like, hey, there's this great story about food that's really fucking interesting and fun. You know, I have to be like, oh yeah, and also it's made by a pedophile. Fuck him. You know, like, god damn it, people, just make good stuff and then don't do bad things. Why is that so hard? Don't do bad things in general, actually. Regardless of whether or not you make stuff, don't do bad things. How about that? Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next life. Laters. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you have any things to say about it, leave those in the comment section. If you like the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, share the video, tell your friends, start a cult, sacrifice your firstborn and paint their skull golden. I don't know, I mean, not that last bit. No human sacrifices. I'm legally liable. No, none of that shit. But, you know, I got Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. I stream on Mondays. I also have a Patreon, but the obvious caveat with Patreon is you never donate to anyone unless you have money to burn. And if you have money to burn, then why not donate to a charity instead? I've got a few linked in my description at all times. I'm not affiliated with any of them, obviously, but yeah, I just thought they were cool. So, you know, thanks for watching.